So, continuing with chapter 2, I think we left off with IRAs. Um, and what we're really talking about here in chapter 4 is, good morning, is that front of the 1040, right? The front page of the 1040, and it's just sort of random bits and pieces that fit in there. The reason we're talking about IRAs here is that where does an IRA go on your 1040? Is it a source of income or a deduction for AGI? It can be a source of income if you get a distribution, right? Like you saw on an annual. But it can also be a deduction for. So, traditional IRAs, deduction for AGI if certain conditions are met. We're going to look at what those are in a second. And it's the taxable distribution if you're pulling it back out. Roths don't really show up anywhere. You don't get a deduction for them, and you don't pay tax when you pull them out. So they're kind of, well, we are going to need to pay attention to pieces of them for taxes, but they don't show up on your tax return per se. But neither can you throw $100,000 a year in them. There's limited how much you can contribute. Okay, so here's the basic rules. With both a Roth or a traditional, your contribution is limited to the lesser of 100% of your earned income, or $5,500. You get an extra $1,000 a year if you're 50 or older. Okay, so that's basically the limits. But there's lots of potential phasing out of those numbers. When I say something's phasing out, what does that mean? It's going away. But you're losing the ability to fully fund your IRA or your Roth. Little tidbit over here on the right, you can make contributions, I think I've talked about this before, all the way up through the due date of your tax return. So in 2017, that's not me. That sounds like my alarm. I'm already up, so that's good. In a current year, you can deduct up through April, up through the due date of the next year. So that gives you a little bit of latitude, actually some money in the bank. And this is really nice because as you get older, it gives you that ability to put in another $1,000 a year. Okay, but what we're going to need to do is look at our book to see what these phase outs are, because they get a little squirrely. Okay, so page 419, we're going to look at our phase out for Roth. Why would there be a phase out if you don't even get to deduct it? What would the IRS even be talking about? Why would you phase out how much you can contribute if it's not even deductible?
Because people with higher income could be somehow getting an advantage.
Yeah, because if I put money in a Roth, what is the tax advantage? I don't get a deduction.
Right, you don't get taxed on it when you put it in. It's pre-tax dollars.
Yeah,
It's
pre-tax dollars.
post-tax dollars, but you don't get taxed on the pulling it out or the interest.
On the earnings. Okay, make sure everybody's tapped into that. The question was, why would we have a phase out for Roths? There's no tax advantage to putting money in it today, right? They don't get a write-off. But if I do that every year, I mean, my husband and I, that's what we funded is Roths. All those years you put it in, it grows tax-free. And then when we pull it out, you don't pay tax on that, right? So if we don't phase out because we're not high income, but if we were, you lose the ability to do that because the IRS isn't trying to incentivize people that make $500,000 a year to do it. They're trying to get working class Joes to do it, right? So even though there's not a deduction, there's a phase out. So on page 419, you can see, where is it? On the bottom. So when you're married filing jointly and you hit $186,000 of AGI, you start to lose the ability to fund the Roth. And I think I've got an example on the next page. No. Okay, let's just go back here then. So the phase out range for single or head of household is $15,000, right? Because you start phasing out at 118 and it's all gone by 133. So the range of phase out is 15 grand. So that's your denominator to the equation. So what I'm saying is, let's see. What I'm saying is that if you, let's just try this, write this down in your notes. If you are single and you have a AGI of 130 and you're not over 50 years old, how much can you contribute? So if you're single, AGI of 130, how much do you think you can contribute? So the phase out is calculated, the denominator is the range, and the numerator is how far over the AGI are you? Single and under 50. How much can I put in my Roth? Focus. Let's see. So the phase out, the denominator is 15,000 because on the bottom of page 419 I see that that's the difference between 118 and 133. And how much over? I'm $12,000 over the phase out, right? Because it starts at 118 and I make 130. So 12/15 of the ability is going to go away. So I think I'm, yeah. So I think I get $1,100 a contribution. So I wish I could take the full 5,500, but 4,400 of it is phased out. So I can put 1,100 bucks in my Roth. Does that make sense? So again, the denominator is the range. So I think for married, it's only a $10,000 denominator. So that table is just for Roths. So if you need to make some notation in your book or something, because you're going to need this resource obviously for the exam, make sure you understand this table only pertains to Roth IRAs.
What if you are above 133?
Then you can't contribute. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, good question. So Betsy asked, if I'm above 133,000, what happens? Morning. You're fine. If you're over 133,000 of AGI, then you just don't get to put money into your Roth at all, right? Okay, so that's how Roths work. Make sure again that you circle bottom of page 419 that is the table only for Roth. Okay, so traditional IRA. Traditional IRA, same numbers, 5,500 if you're under 50 years old, 6,500 if you're over 50 years old. But this gets a lot more complex as far as phase outs. So there's three scenarios here. One is I'm single, so there's phase outs there. One is I'm married filing jointly, and neither of us are in a plan at our jobs. See what I mean? So I'm married, I'm filing jointly, but both of us work for employers that don't have like a 401k. Or I'm married filing jointly, and one of us is an active participant in a plan. So the first thing you have to do before you can even figure out what table to look at to calculate phase outs is you have to ascertain that. I think that's what I just said here. So let's start here. We're trying to figure out, obviously, I want to fully fund my IRA on an annual basis. I've decided to do a traditional IRA instead of a Roth. And my question is, can I put in my full 5,500? I'm single, or 6,500 if I'm 50 years old or older. So let's go look on page 420. And again, I encourage you on all these tables to make sure that you understand what you're looking at. So on page 420, at the top, it tells us type of taxpayer, and in this example, I'm single or head of household, and I'm not a plan participant. That means I don't have a 401k at work. What does that tell me about how much I can contribute to my to my IRA? As much as, or not as much as I want, but there's no phase out, right? There's no phase out. Yay. Okay, next line. I'm single, but I have a plan at work, a 401k. When do I start phasing out? 62,000. And I'm all done being able to contribute anything to my traditional IRA once I hit 72,000 of AGI, right? Okay, so let's just try one of those like we just did with the Roth. So let's say, and again, it's that same calculation where your denominator is the difference between the top and the bottom. So in this example, my AGI equals, so this was a Roth, and this is a traditional. And my AGI equals 67.5, and I'm single, but I'm 58 years old. And I want to know how much, and I'm an active participant in my plan at work. How much can I put into my traditional IRA? So your denominator this time is at 15, it's what? 10. Yeah, so the difference between the top and the bottom. And then your numerator is the amount that your AGI exceeds the lower base. So you start phasing out at 62,000, right? So how much am I hoping to put in if I'm 58 years old? 6,500, right? I get that extra grand once I hit 50. But I know I'm over the AGI, so I'm going to lose, what, 55% of that? So let's see, 0.55 times 6,500. I'm going to lose 3,575 of my ability. Is that right? So the calculation, the first thing you have to do is find the right table. Second thing you have to do is set up your fraction of phase out. The denominator for the fraction is the difference between the top and bottom. I don't think it really spells it out in the book how to do this. So however you want to take notes on this. The denominator is the difference between the top and bottom of the range. And the numerator is how much your AGI exceeds that bottom number. And here the bottom number was 62,000. Yeah? All right. Now let's just keep reading the table and then we'll try one more. So, phase out. I'm married, we're filing joint, and we are both active participants in our 401k plans at work. I'm just reading you off the lines and then I'll have you pick out which one to use. The next line. We're married, we're filing joint, and neither of us have plans at work. Do we phase out at all? No. How much can we each put in? $5,500 unless we're over 50, in which case we can each put in $6,500, right? And then this last one, make sure you understand what this is. This is kind of weird. And so I'm married, we're filing jointly, and one of us are in a plan, and one of us aren't. And it says, see note 1 below. So now I'm looking at note 1. When one spouse is an active participant in a retirement plan and the other is not, 2 separate income limitations apply. The active participant spouse can take a fully deductible IRA contribution unless the $99,000 to $119,000 phase-out range applies to the couple's joint income. So I would circle So on the table, is everybody following where I'm reading from? Yeah. So I'm on the table and I'm reading from this one that says married joint with 1 active, right? This is kind of the critical thing. The person that's active obviously starts to phase out a whole bunch lower, don't they? So if I'm the active participant, I start to phase out at 99,000. If I'm the non-active participant, in other words, I'm married and my husband's in a plan, but I'm not, I don't have any phase out until I'm here. So let's just try one of those examples because this is a little tricky. So I'm married filing joint. I'm 46 years old and we have combined AGI of 135,000. How much can each of us put in? The taxpayer is in the plan, in a plan at work, and the spouse isn't. And we're 46 and 47 years old. So I want to advise my client how much each of them can put into their IRA, traditional IRA.
Yeah. That's the phase out and then one is put on.
Yeah. So let's let everybody just take it. That's correct. It takes a while to process this. So we'll try scenario 1, 2, and 3. And now let's say, let's work through the first one and then I'm going to give you time to work on 2 and 3. So I'm co-referencing this table at the top of page 420. 2 people, 46 and 47, AGI 135. This husband's in a plan at work, wife isn't. So the first thing I go up and I go active participant spouse, which is husband, starts to phase out when your AGI gets to 99,000 and completely loses the ability to put any money in an IRA when you get to 119. And they're at 135, so how much can the taxpayer contribute? 0. The non-active participant spouse, the wife, starts to phase out at 186 and is completely done at 196. How much can she put in? Yeah, the AGI is under the phase-out limit. She can put in the full 5,500. Now, let's do the first one over here and then I'll let you go. So now my AGI is 108,000. How is the person that's in the plan at work, the active participant spouse, going to start to phase out? Sure. So what's my denominator? 20 grand. That's the difference between 99 and 119. And my numerator is the amount that the AGI is over how much? AGI minus what? Minus 99,000, the bottom number in the range, right? See what we're looking at? So what is that? 108 minus 99 is 9 grand. So that is going to get me the percentage of phase out. Okay. What percentage does the taxpayer lose of his ability? Yeah, so 9,000 divided by 20,000 is a 45% phase out. And then the spouse isn't active, so when does she start to phase out? 186, but the AGI is only 108, right? Hi, Preston. So what happens to her? Does she get to put in the full amount? Yep. See how that works? Then in the third situation, the AGI is high, right? 192 grand. What happens to the taxpayer's ability to put in money? Does he have any capacity? No, he's done. And what happens with the spouse here? Yeah, 186. So she's 6 grand over the bottom limit, right? So she loses 6,000, and then what's the range? Just 10,000 on that. So she loses 60% of that ability, right? So 3,300 of it goes away. So 2,200. Okay, realistically, this is why many of us as CPAs now refuse to do any sort of pension consulting, because this is just one kind of program or instrument. They're all quite complex. So what many of us have done is just found somebody that we trust and that we like. I always try and find a young woman that's going into the pension administration world and then use her for my clients to give her some ability to start client base. Yeah, so they do all these calculations, but you need to kind of know, again, like I'm not crunching out these numbers for clients, but I've got to be aware if they come in and I see they've got a $200,000 W-2 and they're talking about funding an IRA, it's like, that's not going to happen, right? Okay. It's funny to see your own hand in that screen. Okay, so that is that. We've practiced these, so I'm just going to scoot through this. But if you want more practice, Preston, you came in a little bit late, I would tell you to go to pages 419 and 420 in your book. And on the bottom of 419 is the phase-out table for Roth contributions. And on page 420 is for traditionals. And make sure you know how those work. I would come back and work through these with the solutions. I've got a couple in here. Do you feel like we need to take class time to do one more? Are you okay? All right. Okay. This is a little complicated. I'm not going to deal with that. Okay. So that was talking about contributions. Then, so we're on the front of the 1040. Now we also know that hopefully at the end of your life, after you funded your Roth or your traditional, you're going to take money out of it. It's going to help you pay for your bills in retirement. So when you take money out of a traditional, it's taxed as ordinary income. We know that. You can't take it before you're 59 and a half without a penalty. So they're not going to let you retire early.
Is that just a 10% penalty on the earnings?
No, it's on everything. And this is really devastating. I'll tell you, it happened to a number of clients during the recession. When people lost their jobs, they went into their IRAs. You pay full income tax on it, both federal and state, plus 10%. So, I mean, like, there's just one gal in my mind that just sticks out. Single mom, super hardworking lady, has done the right thing forever and a day, save, live frugally. Lost her job, she cashed in her IRA to, keep moving her home, make her mortgage payment, but she lost 40% of the IRA to taxes and penalties. Super screwed. So, I mean, I didn't have any other options for her, but it's the very, 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 very last thing you would ever want to do is go into your IRA. You can't take money out before 59 and a half, unless you've got these very special, and there are special things where you can. I become disabled, I'm buying my first home, I'm paying for college, you can read these. There's a very few things that you can do, but losing your job wasn't one of them. So she paid the penalty. And the other thing is these are loans that you've got to pay back to your 401k or to your IRA. Okay, Roth, and then one more thing here really quick. You have to start taking distributions by the time you're 70. Any idea why the IRS makes you start taking distributions? Say I don't need them. Say I have a great pension from my...
Not earning tax-free income.
They don't want you to keep earning tax-free income, and what they really don't want you to do is die with it. Why? They don't want you to die with your IRA. When you die with assets, your heirs get a stepped-up basis. So they never get their cut of that appreciation. So say I saved my whole life in my IRA, and I got my tax write-offs and my tax-free income. Say I get hit by a bus going home tonight, my kids get it. They get a stepped-up basis, and the IRS never gets a hit on that. It's the same thing when you die with rental property. So they make you they calculate a minimum distribution. Even if you don't need the money, you have to start taking it out.
Well, I mean, by the time you're 70, the majority of it's all gonna be interest anyway, so then it's just gonna keep building.
Yeah, that may or may not be true. It depends upon when you started funding it. But yeah, it could be. If you've done it your whole life, that's probably a true statement. So Roths, again, you don't get a tax break going in, you don't pay coming out. They're tax-free as long as you've had it open for 5 years, so you need to keep that in the back of your mind if you have an older client. And that's really all there is to say about that. Okay, then there's this whole group, and again, this gets pretty complex pretty quick. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the details, but I just want you to be aware. If you have clients that are self-employed, they have this whole other variety of instruments that they can use. And they work the same way as a traditional IRA. The employer, if I'm funding this, so you guys all work for me in my small business, I want to help you with your retirement and then make contributions to your plan every year. I get a tax write-off, doesn't show up on your W-2, and you get to take your earnings tax deferred until you bring it out, right? So these are some of the kinds of instruments, and again, this just gets into the weeds so fast. There's SEPs and SEP IRAs, that stands for I don't know what it stands for. Either self-employed pension or simplified employee pension. But you can put a ton in these. You can put up to 54 grand a year in these instruments. There's payroll deduction IRAs, then there's simple IRAs. I think in the payroll class, you guys had simple for the class, or for the employees that you were processing there. These are really nice plans. They're super easy to administer if I have 100 or less employees. And I can put away up to $12,500 a year for each of you, $15,500 if you're over 50 years old. So that's a really nice option too.
Stands for simplified employee pension.
Simplified employee pension, okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, once I found that it was much easier and less stressful on me to just tell my clients that they had to go hire a pension administrator, I kind of did a little, probably shouldn't have, but a little bit of zoning out on the details of all this, because it just became, do you guys have a pension administrator at JCCS? Do your CPAs do their own pension advising? Nobody's asked you. It's just really a complex area, and to me, there's also a lot of potential risk on two levels. One is giving bad advice from a legal standpoint. But B, I mean, this is like one of the most important decisions people are going to make about their future. I don't want to mess it up because I'm not in this as deeply as I should be to consult at that level. So, so then with 401ks, you can see there's all these different kinds of 401ks. There's a Roth 401k, a Safe Harbor 401k. Yeah, so a traditional 401k, pretty straightforward. We talked about this. I do know about these. You can put in up to $18,000 a year. Your employer has to have a proper account set up, a qualified plan. An employer may match. We've talked about this, but they don't have to. So that's really one thing to pay attention. We talked about this, I think, in payroll class and in personal finance. When your employer's like, I've got a 401k, does that really mean anything to you as far as a benefit per se? Not unless you know the matching. Like, it's cool that they set up a 401k.
And that part of the planning is sort of taken out, it comes out of your paycheck, you don't have to.
Good point, valid point. So you can just choose your funds and it comes out of your paycheck and there it goes, yeah.
Like managing it.
Yep, that's cool.
So if they match up to like 9,000, can you put only 9,000 into it?
Yeah, good question. It depends upon how they write the plan. You can find somebody in Missoula that's willing to fund up to $9 grand a year, grab that job. That's good, really good. Usually the way a match works is they'll say like, 50 cents on the dollar up to, and then they'll give a percentage of your income so that it's different for all of us. So like a great match, a fantastic match is 10. I think the highest I've seen in Missoula, actually, most of the CPA firms, I think, do 15%. Is that right? Up to 15% of your income? Betsy's like, it is, it's, you do 6.
We go, well, 100% to 3 and then 50% to 6.
Okay, let's put those examples up here because this is where it's going. They do 100%, so a dollar for dollar, yep, up to 3% of your comp. And then what was the second part of it?
I think it's 50% up to 6.
Okay, that makes sense. So if I'm making $48,000 a year and I'm funding my 401k at 6%, what's my company's match in this scenario? What's the match? So I'm putting away $28.80.
And they'd be putting up, they'd be matching 2160.
Gosh, how do we figure this out? So they put away,
1480 plus 1740 or 7.
well, let's see. I get 1440 for this first calc, right here, right?
And then we'll
Yeah.
that by 1.5.
Yeah, and then a tack on a 720. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, well, I did 1480 out of the law.
I'm not gonna follow up on that.
No, it's cool.
Is that right?
I accept it.
Is that what you guys got?
Yeah.
Okay, so then in general, what percentage of her comp's getting put away in total? Right, 5,040 divided by 48 grand. So even in this pretty good scenario, is she saving enough? According to what you learned in personal finance? Not really. What was the number again? Yeah, it's actually, they tell you it's now 18%.
What I was asking was, if that 2160, if she was contributing the full 18,000 from her
Okay.
end with that 2160, could that
Oh,
go
be on top of
the
it.
tab there, or is that 18,000 part of the full?
I think that, see, this is why I don't consult on this. I think the 18,000 is just the employee deferral.
Okay.
So the employer, this is just the employee deferral, I do know that. And 24,000 if you're 50 or older is just the employee deferral. So whatever your employer does on top of that, yay, great. Now, rule of thumb too, you are leaving, anything she contributes under this is leaving money on the table, right? Student saying, so you always, I mean, this is easy to say, I mean, it's easy to say, we got the budget for us. You should always contribute whatever the top match is. Otherwise, you're leaving money on the table. The university has some weird calculations. Ours is like 7.01326 or something. I mean, it's some just bizarre number. But I mean, you're absolutely crazy not to fund your own at least that level because you're just leaving cash sitting out there. Okay, so everything we just talked about were self-funded, right? Tax deferral, self-funded plans, Roths, traditionals, 401ks, etc. These retirement plans have kind of gone the way of the dinosaur. I think I've told you guys before, my parents had me when they were really old, so they were born in 1917 and 1819. So their whole generation of people were all worked with the same companies their whole lives, and retired and then got a retirement plan. Okay, that barely exists anymore. Really only if you're in public schools, public health, maybe a public hospital. There's very few organizations you're gonna go to work for that's like, oh, and then I'm gonna take care of you when you retire.
Do you know if the railroad still does that?
The railroad does. But they have a whole separate system. Calculations are separate and they're also exempt from FICA. So it's a really sweet, and it goes back to like the railroad baron
They
days.
just been grandfathered in.
Yeah, yeah. But like my people retired in South Dakota from, John Deere Tractor and Morel Meats and ConAgra, and you got your pension forever. And there's basically two kinds of pension plans. There's a defined contribution and a defined benefit. And these are the ones I'm kind of talking about, that your whole life you knew when you retired what your pension was going to look like. I'm going to make $2,236 a month when I retire. And you lived for that, right? So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these, again, because there's just not that many of them around anymore. But if you're an employer that wants to do that, you've got to make sure that it's qualified according to the Internal Revenue Code. It's got to meet these 5 caveats. Can't discriminate, minimum vesting, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to hire somebody to help you set it up so that you know you're compliant. This is sort of interesting. If you've got your books out and you can look on page 4-28. I actually miss this a lot on tax returns, and it pops up on the tax return. I'm like, oh, whoa, I missed that. So it's people that are low income, or not low income, but relatively low income, that are contributing to an IRA or a 401k. And they get this credit, dollar for dollar credit back from the government that really helps subsidize their contribution. So if you look on this table, and let's say I'm single, and I'm making $13,000 a year. So, I'm working part-time and going to school part-time, let's say. And I put $1,000 into my pension, or into my 401k. I'm on that first line. I get 50% of the first $2,000 I contribute because I make under $18,500. So if I put $1,000 into my 401k, the government just paid for $500 of that. So that's awesome. And then 20% if you make $18,501 to $20,000, you can read the chart. So yeah, like I said, sometimes I'll put in, and that's why I have to make so sure that you input your W-2 into the software, every single box, because it'll have in box 12 how much you put into your 401k, and the software will pick this up. I miss it almost every time. I'll be like, where's that tax credit come from? Oh, they're low income, and so make sure that you get your W-2 put in there accurately. And it goes on a form 8880. Okay, this is a pretty big deal. I've seen a couple of people hit on this. So now I'm leaving the University of Montana and I'm moving to the University of Hawaii. And I don't want to have retirement plans all over the place. I want them consolidated. So what you have to be cognizant of is you need to make sure that you have a direct transfer, as this picture shows. So I call up the administrator from the University of Montana and I say, you need to directly transfer my funds to U of H. If they don't do that, guess what happens? They have to take backup withholding. But then I've only got, I think it's 180 days to get the money back in full. 120 days. So if I don't do that, I called the University of Montana and I'm like, oh, I'm moving to Hawaii and I need my pension fund. And they're like, do you want a direct rollover or a payout? And I don't really know the difference. I'm like, oh, payout. I'd rather have my own money and then distribute it. They have to take backup withholding as if I was going to have to pay tax on it. So they give me, say I saved $100,000. I get a check for $80,000, but I've got to get $100,000 back in the second plan within within 60 days. What does it say? 60 days. But the government's got my other 20,000. When do I get that 20,000 back from the government?
When you put your 20%.
And when I file my tax return.
Oh,
When I file my tax return, they've got $20,000 of federal income tax withholding in anticipation that that's going to be taxable. But it's not. But where am I going to get that 20 grand to make it up? You see what I'm saying? All this can be precluded by just making sure that you have a direct transfer. That's the takeaway. Okay, so let me turn this off. What?